This is not a real dog. I hate to break your heart, but this is just an arrangement of pixels on this little screen. And yet 96% of you guys that I surveyed said you choose to pet the dogs in video games. But why? Well, 38% of people said that they just like dogs, and then 10% of people said they do it for the potential reward or the achievement of it, and then 36% said that they do it because it's the correct thing to do. That's interesting that only 10% seem to have a selfish, personal reason here, because that to me is the most practical explanation. I will probably go up to a dog once, I'll pet it, see what it gets me, and then I probably won't do it again unless there's a valid reason to. So I'm surprised that it's only 10% who look for something similar, because here's the kicker. I also asked you guys whether you would pet the dog in a game even if you knew you got nothing from it. No achievement, no animation, no feedback, no response. And 75% of you said yes. I like to do it anyway. This is fascinating. 75% of you said yes, I would do it for literally no reason. For no output, none of the juice that makes a fun video game a fun video game. Video games are about reward and output and progress, or feeling like you're making progress. It's about critical thinking and solving puzzles and exploring, because all of those things give you a sense of accomplishment. In fact, we usually avoid playing games that don't give us that feeling, and that's when they feel like they're a waste of time or they're boring. That's why ranked modes in competitive shooters are so addicting, and why games that subtly reward your progress as you play are the most fun to play. Seeing part of your map visually update as you explore, or building more of your base in a survival game, making your characters stronger. Games are ultimately about feeling rewarded for our curiosity. But petting the dog is apparently not about that. There's enough satisfaction from the mere knowledge that you pet the dog, even if there's no reward, that people will do it. There's a word for this, and it's called an autotelic action. It's something that you do without the expectation of personal gain, and you do it just for the sake of doing it. Because these actions aren't part of a larger system or a plan, they feel much more personal. They feel much more like your choices. This is your free will to pet this dog. Not to get deep, because I know that this is a video about petting dogs in games, but one of my New Year's resolutions was to do things only for the approval of myself. You know, to have a productive day and not tell anyone about all the things that I accomplished. To play guitar because it looks fun, and not because I have to become amazing at it. To play a video game because it looks cool, and not because I have to turn it into a video. There's so much that I do in life that's fueled by a desire for productivity, and it has a reason. Everything has a purpose. So it is a nice reminder that there are things that we will do just because. And not just that, but collectively as humans, we seek out these experiences, and it manifests in all kinds of silly ways, like petting dogs in video games. But here's where things get even more interesting. Most of us are happy with petting the dog for no reason, for the heck of it. Heck yeah. But for those who don't pet the dog, 30% of them won't do it because there's no reason to. Because it's not necessary to complete the game. So we end up with two polar opposite ends of the spectrum here. You have the autotelic player who will pet the dog just for the heck of it because they want to, and then the more objective-driven player who won't pet the dog because there's no reason to. The theory I'm cooking up here is that this is the same difference between the type of player who will decorate their base in Minecraft versus the one who wants to speedrun to the end of the game and beat the dragon. The same difference between the player who's gonna read through all the dialogue or the lore that a game has because they want to know, versus the player who's not going to unless they have to progress the story. It comes down to what you value more as a player, those autotelic experiences that you set for yourself, or the more concrete objectives that are set by a game. Neither of those are right or wrong, it's just about what makes a video game worth your time. It always seems to be pretty 50-50 whether someone enjoys a game that lacks concrete objectives. I have some friends who could come up with stories for their Sims and torment them for hours, and then other friends who would rather die than have to figure out what to do in a game that lets you do literally anything. I would argue that the same type of player who plays The Sims is the same type of player who would pet the dog, because they're also the type of player who would explore an open world because they want to, without a reason. The same type of player who will complete a random task for an NPC because why not, even if they don't get something they need from it. For them, the experience is the goal. The act of engaging with the environment is fulfilling in and of itself. My roommate is like this, and it's truly fascinating watching her get to level 50 in Ark doing nothing but taming dinosaurs, running around, having the time of her life. All of that I just described is the opposite of the more objective-driven player who's gonna need a reason to do things, and who won't pet the dog because they will sit there and ask, okay, but why? They focus on the goals and the objectives, and they're driven by the structure of a game. They're not gonna marry the most attractive, sexiest, warmest, nicest, kindest NPC in the entire game in Stardew Valley. They're gonna marry the most practical marriage candidate who has the best rewards. And when they play that game as a whole, their goal probably isn't to make a cute farm, but to make the most money and to complete the game. And how efficient, how fast can that be done? The difference can be summed up like this. One player enjoys the experience, and the other enjoys the accomplishment. This is exactly why one player chooses to pet the dog, and the other does not. Do we follow? I cooked with that. I hope you paid attention. I'm sure that most people are a combination of the two. Obviously, these are not mutually exclusive things, but it is really interesting to look at these patterns of behaviors and why people do the things they do, and why we pet the dog, or why we don't. Regardless of the player though, these are still just pixels on a screen, but someone programmed those pixels there. Some incredibly logical, smart, intelligent brain did that, and if you want to build the same skills, you should check out today's sponsor, Scrimba. Scrimba has been one of my favorite places to learn how to code because you will build up a portfolio of useful and relevant projects. I've been using Scrimba to teach myself web development, but there are classes on literally everything, so you can find something that sounds genuinely interesting to you to want to learn. I mean, look at this. Do you want to build a meme generator? A Tinder for dogs? Or maybe you just want to learn Python. You can do that too. The world is literally your oyster here. My favorite part is that you're able to do your coding, see the lesson, and see your output at the same time, so you're not navigating between a million tabs like you are if you're just following a tutorial. There's even a built-in AI that will give you live feedback on your code, so you're able to learn what you're doing wrong. Soon there's actually going to be full back-end support, so you'll be able to fully build web apps on Scrimba. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Scrimba is nice and affordable with monthly and annual plans available, but most of it is completely free. If you do want to upgrade, you can use my link in the description for an additional 20% off. So start learning to code today with Scrimba. So 100% of people can learn to code with Scrimba, but 36% of people said that they pet a dog in a game because they believe it's the correct thing to do. That's kind of interesting. Why does petting a non-existent dog feel like the morally correct thing to do? For the sake of understanding, we're going to compare this to one of society's most classic litmus tests, returning the shopping cart. To return the shopping cart when you're done shopping is an easy, convenient task that everyone recognizes is the correct thing to do. There's no situation other than an emergency in which you're not able to return this cart, but at the same time, it's not illegal to not return your cart. Do you deserve to get yelled at and punished for making the employees' lives miserable? Absolutely. But logistically, there's nothing practically stopping you. So therefore, the shopping cart exists as a perfect example of whether or not people are capable of self-governing, but also, more importantly, whether or not people will do the right thing even if they don't have to. I would argue that the same principle applies to dogs in video games. If you come across a dog in a video game and you see the option to pet it, you see the button prompt cross your screen, it is nothing beyond what would usually be expected of a video game to push the button and pet the dog. But at the same time, just like the shopping cart, you don't have to pet it. So why does it feel like the correct thing? Well, we gotta remember that the presence of literally anything in a video game is something that's hand-picked to make your experience better. You are the center of the universe. Everything is rendered around you for the purpose of you and you only. This dog only exists for you. Therefore, we feel morally like the correct thing to do is to accept that gift and to interact with this thing whose only purpose is to be interacted with by you. There is so much that we could dive into there, but for the record, out of everyone else who said that they don't pet dogs, 25% said that they don't do it because they don't like dogs, and then the remaining percent was kind of just a miscellaneous combination of people who don't want to go out of their way to pet a dog or will only pet it once or something like that. What I do want to look at is the answer to this question, which is, do you expect to be able to pet the dogs in games where you encounter them? The majority of you guys said yes, and that you're more likely to be surprised when you can't pet a dog versus when you can. This is interesting because the whole idea of petting dogs in video games is a pretty recent development. The first time that we saw a pettable dog in a video game was, to my knowledge, Zork 2, which came out in 1981. It's this text-based narrative game, so if you put in that you want to pet the dog, it'll tell you, oh, the dog is now insanely happy, slobbering all over the place and whining with uncontained doggish joy. There's also King's Quest 3 that came out in 1986, where you can pet this little dog named Kenny. Even with that though, it doesn't feel like we saw regularly pettable games and dogs until what feels like the MMO era. You know, World of Warcraft, Ultima Online, those games where you have mounts and pets and you kind of build up a bond with them and level them up as you play. I'd argue that that really solidified the mesh of animals and players and games in the same way that Pokemon did. It's really hard to pinpoint when exactly it became so much of a trend to expect it, but there is this Twitter account that came out in 2019 that has a pretty big role in it. The account is called Can You Pet the Dog, and it basically documents every game under the sun that you can pet a dog in. It's one of those COVID relics that has all the energy of COVID encapsulated inside of it. But it's a cool account. There are hundreds of games, so much so that developers have actually started putting dogs in games just with the hope of being posted on this account and getting that publicity. For that reason, I can definitely understand why some people are kind of fed up with the trend. I think it's kind of sad that, you know, we have this very fruitless action that so many people will do just because they want to do it, but that's not necessarily a two-way street on the development side. But obviously, basic economics, nothing is free. It makes sense, I get it. Some people genuinely hate this trend though, and I am not throwing around that word lightly. The dog industry is insidious and makes parasitic agreements with other industries. In this case, the gaming industry. I get so mad about dog companions. I stopped playing Potion Permit because they force you to have a companion dog, and of course you have to feed it and care for it. At least you don't have to smell the dogs. How far is this stupid culture going to stoop? Dang guys. Maybe I'm misrepresenting how passionate the 5% of non-dog petters are in our pie chart here. Maybe the 25% who don't pet dogs because they don't like them is a much more passionate 25% than I've given them credit for. I mean, 8% here did say that they maliciously avoid petting the dogs. So, do with that what you want. But what's interesting is that even among the people who will always pet a dog in a game, only like half of them say that they actually pet dogs in real life when it's reasonable. So there isn't necessarily a correlation between loving the physical action and wanting to participate in it virtually, whether that means abstaining or petting. Petting dogs in real life has a number of psychological benefits. There's a reason why therapy dogs come to the engineering center at my college every couple weeks, because they are literal balls of stress relief, especially for engineers. We see the sun like once a week. There are countless studies between the relationship between good mental health and being around the existence of a dog. So it is kind of funny that even though 96-95% of people will pet the dog in a game environment where you don't get those benefits, they won't necessarily try and get them in real life where you do. I tried to find any information on whether there's benefits to petting dogs virtually, but safe to say that literally zero research has ever been done on that ever. But I would theorize that there's definitely a little dopamine spike that probably happens somewhere in the process, and the more animation or reward you get, the higher the spike goes. I should be a scientist. But no, I know that connecting to dogs in games is a very real thing, and that's why we have the success of Nintendogs and Pokemon. I guess some people play Pokemon for like the gameplay or the combat or whatever, but I just like all the ones that come in threes. I never played Pokemon, but if I did, it would be just like how I played Minecraft, where every dog I had a name and a backstory. I would go all out building bases for my dogs, and if one died, it was as if the president went down. And I know that that's not a unique experience. We get highly attached to dogs in games, but especially when there's a taming process involved. Going and petting a cat in Assassin's Creed? Fantastic, great experience. But praying for your life for the last bone in your inventory to be enough to satisfy this Minecraft wolf? Deeply, fundamentally, soul-filling, rewarding experience. The spike of dopamine is off the charts. The reason I mention that is because in the survey that I forced you guys to fill out, there was a big emphasis on feeling like you're building a bond with the animal that you're interacting with. Especially because I think that isn't as easy in real life. For anyone who's allergic to dogs, or scared of them, or just isn't around them, Video games are a great way for you to experience a bond that you might not otherwise get to experience. I mean, before I even had a dog in real life, I had a Minecraft dog, and that kind of paved an expectation for the experience. And that's kind of a new thing, which is really weird to think about. And it's cute because pets in real life force us away from the expectations or the objectives of life for a little bit, in the exact same way that they do in video games. And that's kind of philosophical, and I might be extrapolating meaning way beyond what there is here, but that's kind of cute. That's everything that I have to say about dogs in video games. I want to give a big thank you to everyone who filled out this survey. If you want to be up to date on random stuff like that in the future, definitely join the Discord server or subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye!